Barb is ultimately owned by the media industry itself. So we've been in existence since 1981, and we're owned both by the broadcasters in the UK, but also the advertising agencies. Um, and it's very important in the UK to have a centralised body that has both the broadcasters and the advertisers sitting on our board to ensure that there are checks and balances. And we were set up to be an independent authority on television audience measurement in the UK. So before Barb's existence, there used to be two separate surveys, one carried out by the BBC, which is the British state-owned non-commercial broadcaster, and the other commissioned by ITV, which was the major commercial broadcasters. And often the numbers would be different, and there was instability in the kind of marketplace as a whole. So the wider industry came together to form what is known as Barb. So that is us, and we are effectively a small body that represents the views of the wider UK market, and we commission research for that market. Well, in the UK, as in many countries around the world, the service runs on a sample of households. In the UK, there's around 5,100 households which are randomly selected, but representative of the population as a whole. So that equates to about 12,000 people or individuals. And in those households, we install metering that connects to television devices, which effectively measure what they watch. So each individual represents around 5,000 people in the population. And in terms of platforms, pretty much everything that's connected to the television screen, we measure on the Barb service. So if it's viewed, if you're viewing content via the television screen, that is measured through our measurement technique. So that's a very good question, because increasingly, I'm sure in Brazil, as also in the UK and other countries, there's an increasing fragmentation and viewing moving to the secondary screens. We're doing this via both increasing the panel measurements. So we're going to continue with this panel of households, but we're installing software now onto their tablets and hopefully smartphones that will track, and their PCs and laptops, that tracks their viewing content on those devices. Secondly to that, the broadcasters in the UK are embedding their online players. So whenever anyone in the country, in the UK, views BBC iPlayer or a broadcaster's online player, it sends back packets of information to us of everybody in the United Kingdom. And that way we get a very good raw census measure of everyone in the UK. And the panel gives us who they are and demographics. So the intention will be to take the raw data from everybody in the UK, together with the demographics from our panel, to give an outline of how old or young they are, whether they're male or female, etc. So that's how we're approaching that. But it's not yet ready to go to market. So at the moment, we are still just reporting viewing on the television set, but increasingly it is important to measure the new devices. I think there'll certainly be elements of harnessing new data sets, absolutely. But I don't personally think we'll ever move away from the idea of having a sample to represent the population, purely on the basis that although data sources and third-party data sources are great at giving you kind of raw granularity, what they often lack is ability of context of who those people actually are, and also how it relates to their other viewing. So what we really want to know is people who watch it on the TV set, how are they also watching on their tablet? Is it extra viewing, or is it taking away? And so data sets, individual data sets on their own, are great at telling me about one thing or the other, but they're not very good at telling us combined, whereas a panel gives you that kind of overarching approach. So I think it's going to be a mix, both of a panel approach and harnessing new, very detailed data sets and fusing them together. We have various quality control procedures, and absolutely it's a question we often get in the UK. So the way pretty much nearly all systems work is Television set has a meter attached to it, and the panelists who take part in the survey have to declare whether they're in the room or not in the room. Now, obviously, it's actually very important that when they're not in the room, they do say they're not in the room. So we do expect there to be some viewing or TV activity where there's no one there, because that is reality. But at the same time, we do need a lot of quite stringent checks to check them, to ensure that panelists do what they're supposed to do. And this, there are various ones. Some are algorithmic based, so we can look at viewers' behaviours over time and also see whether they're changing channels or not, and then identify whether compliance or participation is not correct, and we can telephone them and re-educate them. Additionally, we carry out a coincidental survey where every panelist gets contacted randomly and asked what they're doing, and then we compare that claim to what the meter actually says. And this kind of gives you an idea of the general accuracy of the measurement. And I would expect this sort of analysis is conducted by most services around the world. I'd say very high. I mean, it's important that BARB in the UK is an independent organisation that is actually owned by the industry itself. So in the UK, we operate what's called a joint industry committee. And it means that ultimately the broadcasters and the advertising agencies sit within BARB and give us the direction and agree to all the principles that we find. So it is a globally agreed approach. So from that point of view, it does have credibility because the industry agree, and when they don't agree, we will do things differently. It's not public, so we're owned, it's not for profits, but we do. The data is you can subscribe to the data. We give some free data out on our website, etc. But research is a very costly business, unfortunately. Recruiting homes, metering does cost a lot of money, so access to some of the data does cost money. But that is a fact of life, unfortunately. I would just say it's becoming an ever complicated world out there, and it's very interesting to see different countries approach audience ratings in different ways. So increasingly in Brazil, some people are looking at kind of real-time data as well as data the next day, which is what we currently do. So I would say it's very interesting, and there's a lot of new approaches. So it's a good time to be in this business.